welcome to the virtual next stage, main stage. As you know, with COVID-19, we have been forced into closets, into our basements, behind fancy velour backdrops and fancy printed backdrops, in order to keep the art and the form that is storytelling in a forward progression. And we talked with this gentleman's wife last week. We kicked it off with Elle Stevens the week before. So we're going to keep trying to do this once a week and pull community members out who have either for obligations. I know we've tried with you before, right, Bob, to get you on, but you always have like a rock concert thing or something.
Yeah. I always have something on Wednesday nights or Friday, different engagements when you're as busy as I am.
Right.
Wink.
Wink, wink.
Yeah.
So we've tried to get him on to tell a story, but now that we're in the virtual realm, we can just record it whenever we want to, which is what we're doing. All right. So Bob Thies has a story about a time, and I remember this. I remember this when we talked about this, about a time where the community kind of rallied, as it's sort of rallying now. And you've got kind of a unique way of folding it all together. So you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. You ready to have me go?
Yeah, I am ready to have you go. So it's all you, sir. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I call this story The Silver Bullet. And my story is one of community, cars, and cancer. And with any luck, I'll be able to tie them all together by the end of my story. So the cancer in my story refers to my father, who in 1995 passed away from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The community in my story refers to our community, the one in which I was very fortunate and privileged to grow up, and how this community came together to help my family in a time of need. Then there are cars. Cars have been both a perpetual problem and an essential tool in the navigating the raising and management of my rather large family. So my story begins in 1969. My father had just graduated from college and my parents were engaged to be married. It was also at this time that my parents made their very first major purchase as a couple, and that purchase was a brand new 1969 Mercury Montego, the only brand new car my parents would ever own. Now, I had to Google this car because I was 3 years old when my parents got rid of it, so my memory of this car has faded. But I'll tell you what, I don't know, knowing my parents the way I do, I don't know how my mother allowed my father to buy this car. It was such a cool car. This car was olive green with a black top. It was what we would now call a muscle car, at least in my estimation. It was sporty. It had 2 doors, bench seats in both the front and the back, and it probably drove too fast. But at the time, my mother loved it as much as my father did, so they bought it. That car lasted from 1969 to 1975, about 6 years. And in 1975, my parents had their 6th of what would eventually be 13 children. Yes, 13 children. Upon hearing that I am one of 13, I'm usually hit with the same collection of rapid-fire questions as if I'm on a lecturing tour about large families. How big was your house? Didn't your parents have cable? Have your parents ever heard of birth control? What did your dad do for a living? How much was your electric bill? Can you name all of your siblings? That was a favorite of mine, as if I couldn't name my siblings. Another one was, are you Catholic? Or when I lived in California, it was, are you Mormon? And how many cars did you have? And a string of many other ridiculous, as well as deeply inappropriate questions. At any rate, in 1975, with the arrival of the 6th child, my parents had finally reached the capacity, the limit to the amount of children they could cram into the back seat of that olive green 1969 Mercury Montego, with the back seat belt stretching across all of the little laps of all the little bodies sitting in it. So it was time to get rid of the muscle car. And my parents decided to trade it in for an early 70s model Volkswagen bus. The classic bus that we're all familiar with. This one was red on the lower half with a white top half that came to a point in the front of the bus with the big silver VW logo emblazoned upon it. And it had checkered curtains in the windows to boot. So this was the vehicle that in 1979 transported what was now 8 children from Long Island, New York to Brattleboro, Vermont to find a new home. We'd already outgrown a car and then a whole island. It was finally in Vermont that we found a house that could contain all of us. As the Thies family continued to grow, finding an adequate car would continue to elude us. And then we went through many. Sometimes we'd have 2 cars, sometimes 1 big car. Sometimes we couldn't all go to the same place at the same time because we didn't have a car that would fit all of us. We would take split vacations. There were times when we had 3 cars, like in 1984, when my great aunt came to live with us, and with her came a 3rd car. So naturally that car was absorbed into the family car structure, and with it, a relief to some of the transportation stress that we'd suffered for so long. And it was also in my aunt's car that many of us learned to drive. So with 16 people living under one roof, that's 13 children, 2 parents, 1 great aunt, several cats and a dog, cars would remain a major keystone in the management of our family. Now, right around Christmas of 1993, my father discovered a lump in his groin. He went to the doctor, and after a cursory examination, they determined it was just a boil. Let's leave it alone, they said. A few months later, in the spring of 1994, my father woke up one morning with a lump on his neck so large, it filled the cup of his hand. He went back to the doctor where they performed a biopsy. And then on Friday, the 13th of May, 1994, my mother walked into the video store where I was working. It was a very popular store, and on this particular Friday, we had 3 registers open, and each register had a line of customers several people long. It was a Friday night, and everyone in town needed to get their weekend movie fix. My mother came in and asked if I had a moment to talk, and I knew exactly what the news was. But we were so busy, I couldn't step away. Mom, I said, I'm sorry. We're so busy, I can't talk right now. To which she very calmly replied, come home as soon as you're done with work. Now, come home meant come to the family house, the house where we all grew up. I was 22 years old and I wasn't living there at the time. But when your mother tells you, come home, you know exactly where she means. So it was then, at the end of my workday, that I went to the family home and my parents broke the news to us that my father had been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He would spend the next 10 or 11 months of his life traveling to and from Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center to have all of the necessary procedures, including chemotherapy and a bone marrow transplant, that would at the very least prolong his life, if not save it. Now the Thies family story not only included my father's illness, but the car crisis continued. We had more than 1 car at the time, but not one that was equal to the challenge of the constant 2-hour round trips to the hospital. Not only were there many scheduled appointments, but whenever my father would spike a fever, he'd have to be rushed to the hospital. And still there was the challenge of the everyday transportation of the 6 or 7 school-aged children who still lived at home. Now, my father was a reputable and respected accountant in our town. He had a reputation of being an honest and caring man, a quality that attracted many friends. He could scarcely walk down Main Street without being stopped by a handshake or a wave. People driving by would honk their horns and wave as they saw him. He was a regular Jimmy Stewart. In a passing conversation, my father mentioned to one of his friends that one of the things he wanted to do before he was too far gone with his illness was to get my mother into a better car. Well, this friend of my father, he took this nugget of information and hatched a plan. The plan was that they were going to rally our community in secret to buy a new car for my mother. Now, this was to be a gift, not charity. They knew that my father would never have accepted charity, but he would have accepted a gift in the spirit with which it was offered. And again, this was to be done in secret, which was quite a feat in our small community, where for better or worse, everyone knows your business. So over the next few months, the community came together and collected enough money through secret donations and secret collections at church that they bought my family a 1991 silver Chevy Lumina minivan, which we quickly dubbed the Silver Bullet. Now, all of this was done behind my father's back. He didn't have the slightest inkling of what was going on. And I imagine the task of keeping this secret from him was a far greater challenge than it was to collect enough money to purchase the van. But that's just it. I don't believe the part of collecting money was a challenge at all. The outpouring of support from the community was overwhelming, to say the least. Our community was so quick to help a member in need, a friend in need, that in no time at all, they had collected enough money to not only buy the van outright, but to pay for the first quarter of insurance and include a healthy credit toward gasoline at one of the local gas stations. The van was presented to my parents on Valentine's Day, 1995, which was immediately followed by a scheduled trip to the hospital. But with the new surge of hope and love and with a new set of wheels, my parents were able to take the kids, the ones still living at home, on one last mini vacation the following weekend. A weekend in Boston and a brand new to them ride. As soon as they returned, my father took out a full-page ad in the local paper to thank our community for their generosity. He was completely touched by this act. The story of my father's illness does not have a happy ending. He passed away just a month and a half later. I sometimes say that you can measure a man by the length of his funeral procession. Well, if that's true, and as I surmise it might be, then my father was a great man. Ask anyone in the caravan of cars that seemed to go on for miles, led by the Silver Bullet. Or ask anyone in town who was stuck in the middle of that standstill traffic caused by that funeral procession on that day. As we navigate this unusual time in our world right now, I'm constantly seeing parallels between my story and our collective story. I'm encouraged to know that at the very heart, people want to help. There may be political or financial obstacles that we're encountering right now, but it's the communities that are helping us survive, whether it be by driving homemade masks to those who need them, or by picking up groceries or meals for the hungry, or by engaging in a socially distant meeting, whether it be virtually or 6 feet apart. All I know is that when this is all done, I hope to be able to load my family into our family car and drive. Drive to all of our friends' houses, drive to all of our families' houses, and drive through our community, the one that still cares about its members, and to say thank you. So thank you.
Nicely done.
Thank you very much.
As I know we had a brief moment to talk before we went on, and when we were setting this whole thing up, and I remember the drive. I remember your dad very well. I remember him being very well respected. So,
yeah, it was.
And it just speaks to the resolve of the community that you and I choose to call home, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like they would have done this for anybody. It just happened to be my father,
Right.
the Jimmy Stewart of the town. But one of the reasons that Bethany and I moved our children from California to Vermont is because we knew that we could provide our children with this sense of community, and we could give to our children what I had growing up in this community. And, we had 2 kids in California, but we moved here and had 2 more, which never would have happened had we not moved to Vermont. And now we have a happy family of 6.
There you go.
Yeah.
Just keeping on that large. Now, here's a question. I know 13 siblings.
Yes.
I probably knew maybe half of them. And they're
half, I would say, probably.
Yeah, probably. And but now they're all, I assume, grown and gone now. Have they all gone on to create, like, 4 kids is a large family. I would consider that large.
Yeah, my mother has, I want to say 31 grandchildren.
Wow.
I think number 31 was born in April. So
Wow.
almost all of us have children. A couple of us don't, but the ones of us who do have children have made up for the ones of us who don't have children.
31 grandchildren. There's got to be some gift giving rules in there that you guys have.
Absolutely. Well, we do a secret Santa with the kids. We draw names for our nieces and nephews, and names are drawn for our kids. That way, it's kind of equal. We just, we're given one gift for our children, and we give one gift to 4 other kids, and all the kids get a present. And we don't get presents for the adults. We'd have to take out a loan every year if that was the case.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we figure it out. We have grand holidays in our family.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. You do. Well, Bob, thank you for coming on and sharing that story. It was inspiring, and it just heartens me to know that that this community can just rally behind an entire community down, or just one family who just needs a little boost.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me again. I really appreciate it.
Yes, it's true. All right, so that's going to do it from the virtual Fables main stage at the Next Stage Arts. So we'll be publishing these to YouTube and podcasting them. So there you go. And Bob, I'll make sure you get a copy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.